You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
Monday. It is McGuire Mondays here on Toronto Sports Rush. I'm Julie Stewart-Binks, joined by Pierre McGuire, and we are reunited after about a week and a half off as I was on the other side of the world in Bali, Indonesia. And let's just say I was not watching any hockey over there because it is 12 hours ahead of what is the time in the East Coast. But Pierre was watching tons of hockey. And I mentioned right before we came on, Pierre, I felt like Austin Powers being cryogenically unfrozen when he tries to figure out like what has gone on in the world since he's been gone. And one of the things I recognized was that a lot of people were very upset with how the Leafs played on Saturday night against the Nashville Predators after stringing together a couple of very interesting, good wins. According to Craig Berube, they had found their identity after the Rangers win. You've been watching it all. Give me the Coles notes, the Sparks notes. What's going on with the Leafs in this moment?
Last week, I thought they were good. 6-2 win over Calgary, 2-1 win over Colorado, kind of a statement game. And then they went into New York, and they got in around 3 o'clock in the morning, and they win the game against a very urgent Ranger team, Julie, 4-3. So things are looking good as the week goes along. They get into Nashville, Friday night in Nashville, no game. I don't know what they did for dinner. And then the next day, they start the game on time, Julie. They're up 2-0, and Scott Laughton deflects a puck out of the air with a high stick to make it apparently 3-0. The goal gets waved off, correctly so, and then it's over for Toronto. In-zone coverage was poor. Penalty killing was poor. Face-off play was poor. Effort level was poor. And so you have to wonder, if they go up 3-0, is the effort poor? And I think it's not, but they don't go up 3-0 and they eventually lose the game. So internally as a coaching staff, you have to figure out why that happened.
And why do you think that would happen against a team that's ranked 30th in the league and against a team, the Leafs, as you mentioned, they were up 2-0 after the first period. They're out shooting Nashville 12-6. And then the next two periods, they have 5 unanswered goals scored against them. So if you're looking at this team, if you're on the bench, you're in the locker room, what happened?
I'm going to say they let their guard down. I think they thought it was going to be an easy night against an opponent that's not going to be a playoff team. Obviously, in Nashville, it's been a very disheartening season for them down there. And you got to give Nashville some credit. There's some youthful enthusiasm on that team. You know, a kid like Kiefer Bellows is getting an opportunity to play in the National Hockey League. A kid like Luke Evangelista is getting a chance to play in the National Hockey League. So a lot of these guys are auditioning for big-time jobs next year, and they don't want to ruin the dress rehearsal. And so part of it is I think Toronto just let their guard down. They didn't respect the names on the sweaters on the Nashville side of things, and eventually that caught up to them. All that being said, I think the Leafs understand 3 of their next 4 games coming up, Julie, are against non-playoff teams. They got a chance to put a lot of points in the bank. They're going to have to respect Philadelphia based for their next game on Tuesday night in Toronto. Based on what I saw, Philadelphia has been horrid. They've been horrid. They've lost their last 4 games on a 4-game trip, and their worst game on the trip was yesterday against Chicago. In Chicago, they were bad, really bad. So Toronto's going to have to show up with their A game because you know Philadelphia's going to be playing guilty on Tuesday night in Toronto.
Right, certainly. And you mentioned one player, of course, Scott Laughton, who is a former Philadelphia Flyer playing against his former team for the first time since being traded. And there's been a lot of scrutiny about him in his first couple weeks as a Toronto Maple Leaf. He's been playing on the 4th line. He really hasn't been getting a whole lot of minutes, and he's also been, everyone wanted him, was anticipating him to be that 3rd line center. What do you make of how the Leafs have used him so far?
Well, you got to earn your ice time, and I think Scott would understand this because he's been through a lot over the course of his career. He hasn't earned the opportunity or the right to be the 3rd center in Toronto right now. It's been a very disjointed start for him in a Maple Leaf sweater. He looks confused in his own zone. He's not nearly as physical as what I'm used to seeing him play. He's not hard enough on the puck, which is something I've always seen him do. So I think they're trying to make the game easier for him right now, playing him on the left side on the 4th line with David Kampf and Steve Lorentz. We'll see how that translates. But in a perfect world, Toronto brought him to Toronto to be that third center and to free up Max Domi maybe to play in another position. Now Max is patrolling the third line and Scott's on the fourth line as a left winger. So I think eventually it'll work out. It just hasn't yet.
I understand the idea of protecting him and sort of hearing Craig Berube just, you won't, especially with Toronto and the fan base and this team and letting him get his sea legs. But is there maybe value to having him have more ice time on the third line to be able to even just get that confidence and that feeling of familiarity with this team?
It's a great point, and it's very fair. Now, I also know these are important points, for Toronto, because getting out of the 2-3 hole in the Atlantic Division is pretty important. And if they can catch Florida, that's great. So it's a tough time of the year to be experimenting. And I think that's probably why they're not doing this with Scott yet. And that's why I started the answer to your question by saying you got to earn your ice time, especially at this time of the year. And right now he hasn't. But your point has a lot of merit. It really does. I'm just taking you to the coach's perspective where he's like, no, we're winning. We're not worried about feelings right now. And I like Scott Laughton a lot personally, as a person and as a player. I do think he'll snap out of it. But the dress rehearsal for him has got to be successful very soon, or he's not going to get those minutes.
I was just curious because I would imagine if a guy is playing on a line that might have line mates that he might click with more, who might support him more, and if it is a higher, a third line over a fourth line and getting more ice time, that it's almost, chicken or the egg type thing. Do we wait for him to do well on the fourth line and give him third line, or do we allow him to kind of to give him the environment to succeed? And I know that's, as you mentioned, we can't be experimenting kind of at this point in the season, but as the games continue to roll on and as we get closer to playoffs, that window of even just looking at experimenting is very swiftly closing. So we know that there's a lot of pressure on Scott Laughton to step up, and that is something that the Leafs, I think, had expected to click maybe quicker than it has with him being on this team and acquiring him. Although there were a lot of people ahead of time that were sort of not necessarily sure how that would look. But Pierre, overall, we can look at each game, but I'm looking at the Leafs and I'm not even really sure what this team is good at and who this team is. And I'm curious what you think about that.
I think they're getting to where they want to be. I think what they're finding out is McCabe and Tanev can be a great shutdown tandem. I think they're finding out that Morgan Riley playing with Brandon Carlo is going to be an effective tandem. I think they're finding out that Oliver Ekman-Larsson playing in the 5-6 hole with Simon Benoit, that's going to give them enough defensive awareness and puck moving on that depth tandem to be very successful in the playoffs. So I think they're finding out they've got a ready-made top 6 defense core that's really good. I think they're finding out Mitchell Marner and Matthew Nyes and Auston Matthews are an elite line. I think they know that. John Tavares has been tremendous this entire year. I think they know that. I think they're trying to figure out their identity with their bottom 6 forwards. That's the next part of the process. And that's why, you're talking about Scott Laughton. So think about this for a second, Julie. 3 of the next 4, that's why I brought it up, are against non-playoff teams, starting Tuesday night at home against Philadelphia. Then they go to San Jose. And rather than being a back-to-back, which is something that's really important for the fans out there, San Jose, day off, LA, then LA, Anaheim, back-to-back. And the reason why I say that is you can look at that San Jose, LA, back-to-back, and I've gone through it as a broadcaster and I've gone through it as a coach. There's no flights out of San Jose after games. So you either bus up to Oakland or San Francisco, which is 40 minutes to an hour, depending on the traffic. Then you fly to LA. It's one of the worst back-to-backs in the league. Toronto's not going to have to do that. They have a day off in between. And that's why I think quality practice time for Scott Laughton is going to matter. They're going to get some now. They're going to play Philadelphia Tuesday, travel day Wednesday, play in San Jose, day off Friday, play in LA. So he's going to start to get more amalgamated with the team. And I think this next stretch is important for him. It's really important for the team.
So then just to track back a little bit, what do you see as maybe when you are okay, so this stretch is very important, but what is this team good at right now? Like, I just find myself trying to figure out, is this a skill-based team? Is this a team that's good at defense? Do they have grit? Like, who are they?
They're good question. They're getting better in their own zone. I think they've been getting all year long. It's been a process, but they're getting better. They're getting better line changing and matching up, which is important when it comes to the playoffs. Their power play has improved exponentially from the start of the year when it was an unmitigated disaster. So I think that's a positive. They've got two big goalies that are very good in terms of depth, and I think that's a positive for them. So they're starting to find out. They're better defending against the rush than they have been in years past. So I think that's another positive thing. The negative part is the inconsistencies. And I think a lot of that inconsistency comes from their depth forwards. Then they've got to figure that out. They're going to have to figure that out quick. But I think and that's why I say they've played 11 games in March. They've got 5 wins and 6 losses. For an elite team, which they are, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. They're a game below 500 if you really think about it. I know there have been some shootout or some overtime losses. I get that, but they're still losses. They got to figure out the depth part of their game with their forwards. And I think once they do, they become a really hard out for anybody.
Right. When they're firing all cylinders, they could be the best team in the league and beat the best team in the league on any given night. Yep. However, that hasn't been necessarily the case. And I'm looking at the stats, and we see that they had an opportunity to go ahead of Florida this past weekend. Both Florida and Tampa lost as well. So I guess they're it's funny looking at Florida and Toronto. Their stats are just incredibly very similar, except for the goal differential. Now, I'm going to read you some of these stats that I found through Natural Stat Trick, which when you look at where the Leafs are, you'd think, they're doing pretty well. This is going to be great. But then you see they're 22nd in expected goals, 21st in scoring chances, 23rd in having the puck. In the first few months, they were top 5 defensively. Now they're 17th in the league. They've been probably bottom 5 over the last few months. When you break down exactly what those stats are, what stands out to you about that based on versus the points and where they're in the standings and how they're actually playing in each game?
You go from 5th to 17th in terms of team defense. Big part of that is not having enough depth in your lineup. That's number one. Number two, we talked about this before you went to Bally. One of the things that has to happen is you got to come out of their own zone cleaner. I think that's starting to happen. They lost their way for a while. So when you don't come out of your own zone clean, you usually have it come right back in your face. And so that happened to them. And then the third thing is their in-zone coverage needs to be better with their point coverage. They're giving up way too many point shots. Pucks are getting through. It's creating second and third chance opportunities for the opposition, and it's forcing them to defend longer. They've got to pressure and do a better job taking away those shooting avenues from the blue line in. I'm sure that's something that they're talking about as a coaching staff, and I'm sure they're trying to relay that to the players. I think a swift kick in the derriere happened on Saturday night, and I don't expect for them to play like that the rest of the way. I think they'll be a lot better.
What do you think when you talk about that with just sort of the response from the coaching staff? What kind of, knowing this team and watching this team all year, what kind of messaging, and knowing Craig Berube as a coach, what messaging do you think would work with this team to make them maybe get it?
Julie, they got a captive audience there as a coaching staff. And the reason why they have a captive audience is because this team has underachieved for a long period of time. They've underachieved. So if you're a player there and you have any kind of athletic conscience at all, you're saying to yourself, okay, we tried it our way for a long time. We got a bunch of coaches fired. It didn't work. This guy's won the Stanley Cup. His staff, most of his staff have won the Stanley Cup. We better pay attention to this guy. And so as a coaching staff, you need to know that's the collateral you get to play with in the dressing room. Mm-hmm. The fact that these guys haven't won, they've underachieved, especially in the playoffs. And so they've tried it their way and it didn't work. They've made some changes to the lineup. They've brought in some bigger, harder, more physical players. They've brought in a little bit more skill. They've had the development of Matthew Nyes, which has been tremendous. The development of Bobby McMahon, which has been tremendous.
Yeah.
Pontus Holmberg has been a tremendous player. I know he doesn't get a lot of time, but I can tell you he's been a really good player for him. If you're a coach in the league, you like that player because you know exactly what you're going to get night in, night out from that player. So there have been a lot of good stories here. But if you're the coach, I think more than anything else, you're running this thing with an iron fist right now. The ability to listen to input from your players or the ability to listen to input from other people in the organization, that's out the window. Right now, you got to create a playoff mentality in your dressing room. I've been through this twice as a coach and a person, and that's what, if you don't do that, your players aren't going to achieve to the level. You got to have a battle hard mentality, and it starts with the messaging in your dressing room.
Right. And with the playoffs just around the corner here, I've listened to a number of podcasts and articles that have said this past weekend could be a weekend that might bite some of these teams in the butt later down the stretch, just looking at points and positioning and whatnot. And I wonder, why is it maybe like this past weekend? Because from your standpoint of having been through this, at what point does it get really serious with like, okay, we're now locked and loaded into complete I mean, you're always looking toward the ultimate goal, but like now this is really serious.
Right after the trade deadline, because you know exactly what your roster is going to be. You know the players have been added, you know the players have been subtracted, and you should, by this time anyways, know the identity of your team. You should. Doesn't mean you always will, but you should. And I think in Toronto, they know exactly what the coach wants them to do. They know exactly the way he wants them to play. The players are tired of losing. You think Auston Matthews likes losing in the first round of the playoffs? You think Mitchell Marner doesn't want to have a huge playoff? You know, these guys, you think John Tavares, who's been searching for the Stanley Cup forever, you don't think he wants to win in Toronto? You think Willie Nylander's happy with where they are? Morgan Riley, my gosh, he's been there from the start to the finish. He's experienced all the negativity. All these guys want to win. So now they got to listen to the coach. They know. That's why I throw those names out there. These are the longest tenured guys there. And most of them, outside of Tavares, they're Leaf draft picks. They grew up in the organization. They've been kicked in the teeth. They're tired of this stuff. They want to win. They want to win.
I mean, it is a huge test of character to see if you can rise to the occasion or if you're going to crumble underneath it. But the fact is that they've had to at least try to rise to the occasion every single season. Looking at Auston Matthews, what do you make of his play right now when there is, you know, there's some circling, not necessarily confusion maybe about this nagging injury that he still has, but what do you make of his play?
First of all, one of the things I know about Auston, he desperately wants to win. Secondly, he knows the difference between pain and injury, because I think when you're a targeted player in the league, you find out you're going to get hurt a lot. So you got to find out the difference between pain and injury. And usually you're dealing with pain and not so much worried about injury. It's hard to fight through it, but he's found a way to do it. Do I think he's 100%? No, Julie, I don't. I don't think he's 100%. There's certain parts of the game where you say, okay, when he's healthy, he's winning that race. When he's healthy, he's shooting that puck with more velocity and precision. When he's healthy, he's winning that one-on-one battle on the boards. Those three situations I've seen where that's not the same Auston Matthews I'm used to watching. That's not a knock on him as a player. That's just a reality of where he is, I think, health-wise. But he's not going to use that as a crutch or an excuse. The great players never do. You know, I will tell you, I know how hurt Mario Lemieux was when we were playing in Pittsburgh. I know how hurt he was. Man, oh man, he showed up every single day. He never let his team down. And I don't think Austin's letting his team down. I think he's competing as hard as he can. You know, I mean that sincerely. So it's not easy, but I do think eventually he'll find a way. He'll find a way to get through.
I think you make such a great point with the pain versus injury, playing hurt versus playing injured. Everyone seems to be playing hurt. Injured is a completely different thing. Yes. But with Auston, if things aren't, if his best parts of his game aren't necessarily working and he's battling through it, but it's not clicking, like, what do you do? I mean, you hope that it gets better and you hope that he figures it out. But like, what if he doesn't?
He's going to have to fight through it. This is what you got. That's why you asked me, what do you do now? Everybody knows what their roster is in Toronto. There are no more changes coming. The cavalry can't show up. It's already here. They know their team. They know what they have to do. So this is where you just got to buck up, and they know it. Look at these players. Know they know the coaches know. That's why when you can ask Craig Berube this question, and I'm sure he'd give you the answer. One of the most remarkable things he saw when they were playing in St. Louis and they won the Cup in 2019, the play of Alex Pietrangelo, who was I did every game they played that entire playoff year. That guy was targeted in every series. He was nowhere near 100% when he was playing, but he was superhuman. And the other part of it, too, was Ryan O'Reilly, who ended up being the Conn Trophy winner.
Mm-hmm.
He was off the charts, and he wasn't 100% because I tell you right, starting in the San Jose series, I saw it happen. Like they were going right after this guy. And so this is what makes for great folklore in the playoffs. Is these guys that have to go through this, and Auston's going to have to be one of those guys.
Yes, definitely. And I'm sure as you mentioned, there's probably other guys on the team dealing with things like that. But when you look at the standings, and we talked about how big that first place in the Atlantic Division is because the 2-3 spot with both Florida teams there, also both past recent Stanley Cup champions when you look at it, which is kind of crazy thinking about that, how you most likely don't want to be facing them in the first round. How do you think, I know the Leafs play and every team plays every team during the whole season, but it always comes down to a few teams, right? Because of the way that the divisions are and the wild card matchups are and everything like that. Could this Leafs team right now, in your opinion, beat a Florida or a Tampa if they face them in the first round?
Yes, 100%. And that's not a knock on those other teams. They've got more than enough depth to do it. They've got more than enough firepower to do it. They've got more than enough matchup capability to do it. I think this is going to be a hard playoff for Florida. They lost a lot of guys in the offseason. You lose Brandon Montour and Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Those are substantial losses. And don't forget, you were gone. Aaron Ekblad suspended for the last 20 games of the year. And so that'll carry over into the playoffs because of a performance-enhancing drug situation. That's difficult for them too. So you've taken 3 of your top 6 defensemen from last year and put them in the, either different situations or obviously in the press box. That's tough to overcome. So I don't think Florida's a lead pipe cinch to get there. And having seen teams that have won back-to-back, or not back-to-back, but in the final back-to-back, it's hard. It takes a lot out of you. And so I think it's tough for Florida. Tampa is still figuring out their roster, but they're obviously a good team. They knew they needed more jam. They went out and got it at the trade deadline, especially with Yanni Gourde, which I thought was a really good acquisition for them. So we'll see long term. But do I think Toronto can beat both those teams? The answer is yes, I do. I do.
Okay. You need to be like you're a spin zone politician for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I love it. No, I'm just
No, you know what I got to tell you, Julie? I think a lot of people in Toronto used to get mad at me because I would tell the truth and say, this team's not good enough. They're not good enough defensively. They're not hard enough. They don't do the little things well. And I would tell you right now, I feel more comfortable about this team, Toronto's team, than I have probably 20 years, 15 years.
Right. And I agree with you on that. I just felt recently that they've been a little, as I told Craig Button, like meh, like I just wasn't really sure where they were, what they were going, and kind of just coasting with maybe some being able to string together a couple of wins and then having these weird losses, trap games, we can call them, whatever it is, as you mentioned, the effort, maybe taking their foot off the gas against one of the worst teams in the league in the Nashville Predators on the weekend. What do you think about the fact that, okay, we know Leafs Nation and all the media and everyone in Toronto just goes banana sandwich when something like this happens? They're just like the world. It's the world is on fire when something like this happens. And looking at the media, I was like, wow, like is this an overreaction? Because I feel like that's always the case. But I'm like, why is everyone reacting like this right now?
Because their expectation is so high for the group. So, the 1976-77 Canadians only had 8 losses. I was living in Montreal then, like I was a kid. Any loss, it 8 losses the entire year. Any loss was like death in the family. It was unbelievable because the expectation level for the organization was so high. They eventually went on to win the Stanley Cup. And so I think in Toronto, they see the lineup changes. They see the new coach in place. They see the way the team has played, by and large, pretty responsible defensively. They see the depth that they have in goal, and everybody's like, this is going to happen. But then it doesn't happen, and people get upset. One other thing, the great Bill Parcells had the best line, I think, of any coach I ever heard. You are what your record says you are.
Yeah.
So in the month of March, they've played 11 games. They've got 5 wins and 6 losses. Now they have a chance. That's why I brought up the other numbers. 3 of their next 4 games are against non-playoff teams. Philadelphia's not a playoff team. San Jose's not a playoff team. And Anaheim's not a playoff team. But in between that San Jose and Anaheim game, there's a game in LA. LA's got the best home record in the league. You go out there and establish yourself in those games in California, in San Jose, in LA, and in Anaheim, all this other stuff goes away.
Yep.
It goes away because you're putting points in the bank and you make a statement in LA on a Saturday night. You make a statement. We just beat the best home team in the league.
Right. You can change the narrative so quickly in Toronto with just one game here. Like, it's just, I mean, what a roller coaster riding this team throughout the season. But let's go through some of those games. Number one, the one tomorrow night, Tuesday, against Philadelphia. What's 1 or 2 things that you think are extremely important for Toronto to execute against this particular Flyers team where they are right now?
Yeah, get a good start. Philadelphia's just coming off a 7-4 loss in Chicago. They're going to be urgent. John Tortorella is going to be really angry with those guys. They've had a day to stew in it, too. They left Chicago. They get to Toronto. They're going to hear about how bad they were. And so they're going to be ready to – Philadelphia be ready to play on Tuesday night. So you better match their intensity early on. That's number one. Number 2, don't give up odd man rushes. Make it a hard game for them. If they're going to beat you, make them beat you by out-grinding you. I don't think they can do that. I don't think they're good enough to do that. And the third thing is don't take bad penalties. If you take bad penalties against Philadelphia, they're going to get opportunities on the power play. They got some skilled guys there. Konechny's a skilled guy. Couturier is a skilled guy. They've got Cates is a skilled guy. Sanheim can shoot the puck from the back end. Bobby Brink's a power play scorer. Watch him play at the University of Denver. I mean, so there's so much stuff there. It sounds easy, but it's all about that. All those things I just told you, that's mental makeup. Has nothing to do with athleticism. Yeah. How you start the game, that's here. Whether you take bad penalties or not, that's here. Say, oh, I better not do that. It's a bad penalty. I don't want to do that. And not giving them odd man rushes, that's discipline. Starts here. Those 3 things, it's all a mental exercise. Tuesday night's not an athletic exercise. It's a mental exercise.
Fascinating. Okay, so then when we're watching Scott Laughton, how do we know that he is starting to maybe find his groove with the Leafs against his former team? What are some signs?
He wins races on the forecheck. He finishes his check every single shift. He's strong in the puck, especially from the hash mark to the icing line. He gets to the front of the net and creates space for his teammates, whether he's playing as a winger or a centerman. He's blocking shots. He's got good stick position in his own zone. He's dominating faceoff play if he gets a chance to take faceoffs. And the biggest thing is he's an effective checker where other teams aren't getting quality scoring chances against because he's stabilizing things in his own zone.
I love it. Okay, so I know that like a lot of things depend on how the previous game went to the next game. So I'll just briefly ask you, when we look at where these other teams, these California teams are right now, maybe just one thing against a San Jose team, against LA, and then against a floundering Anaheim team. And I say that with love as a former broadcaster for the Anaheim Ducks.
I know what you're saying. San Jose, a lot of youthful enthusiasm out there. Obviously, Macklin Celebrini, Will Smith, Colin Graff. They're going out, and I know they're being proactive in the college free agent market right now. So they might have some new kids that are actually playing coming right out of college. So that's youthful enthusiasm. I think they've got some question marks in goal. So San Jose's far from being a finished product. LA, Quentin Byfield's gone to another level. Anse Kopitar still, Kopitar. He's just, as you know, you were out there for so many years. he's a phenomenal person, and he's an amazing player. He really is. The fountain of youth is in LA for him. I mean, it's just amazing to see the consistency in his game. Doughty, I think, is now starting to feel his way through. They've got some good things going on there in LA. They're tough to play against in the neutral zone as well. And then Anaheim, tons of young talent. Leo Carlson is really good. Mason McTavish is really good. Zegras has really started to pick it up. I still consider Troy Terry to be a kid, even though he's getting a little bit older NHL-wise. They're trying to find their way on defense. They just signed a young man out of Harvard University, Ian Moore. I don't know if Ian's going to play or not, but I coached him a long time ago. He's a good player. And if he gets an opportunity, you'll see he's a stabilizing force on their back end. If he gets a chance, maybe they send him to San Diego. I don't know. But there's both San Jose and Anaheim. They're making some changes with their roster, and I think they're more positive changes than negative changes.
Right. And especially when you don't have as much to lose, you can really experiment a whole lot more and kind of see what you have. And I feel like, I mean, for Anaheim, it's been a really tough couple years. I mean, it's been a tough, long time that they've been trying to piece together what their core is and kind of get to that next level. I know, talking with some of my former colleagues there that have been working there. I don't know if you saw the sort of viral clip that happened where Brian Hayward was, maybe he was talking to Troy Terry. I forget who the player was, where he was asking him about the first period or something. And he said, well, the bongos really threw us off, which was the anthem in Nashville.
Oh, I did not see that.
Anthem was a guy playing the bongos, and so he said that really threw us off. It was just like a funny, we don't really get a whole lot of color from guys, especially in the game. But I really enjoyed that moment. Okay, so big week for the Leafs, and as we like to do, we sort of will take a bit of a tally on what will be a successful week for the Leafs for when we discuss this again next Monday. And Pierre, let's get you to reiterate, what is a successful week for the Leafs when we come back and talk next Monday?
They got a chance to get 8 points in the standings. I think if they get 6, it's been an amazingly successful week.
Okay, that would be great for them, as certainly for all of Leafs Nation as they wait with bated breath heading into the playoffs. This is the time of the year where everyone is anxiety city. And we are going to be back with you guys for Toronto Sports Rush post game after the Philadelphia Flyers game tomorrow night. So make sure that you check in here. We'll be live. We'll be breaking it down, and we'll have to see if any of the things that Pierre talked about with how they go up against a team that is really going to be feeling the pressure to step up, especially with John Tortorella against, of course, Scott Laughton, who is looking to try to make his mark with the team, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Pierre, thanks so much for all of your incredible insight and analysis as always. And everyone listening and watching, we thank you guys so much. Please like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.